Hi, and welcome back. Second half of chapter 6. Um, so how does the product life cycle work? Every product has a life cycle, and they all pretty much follow the same pattern. They may follow it at very different rates. Some product life cycles are quite short, and some product life cycles may be decades or multiple decades long. Um, but all products at some point are introduced, then they grow, then they reach maturity, and then they decline. So that product life cycle applies to almost any product that you can think of. I can't think of any that don't do that. This process may take decades or even centuries, or it may take 6 months or 9 months. Depends on the kind of product. If you think of giving an example, let's think of the product life cycle for a cell phone. The product is introduced, let's say the Apple, whatever they're up to now, the Apple 7, I think it is, iPhone 7. So the Apple iPhone 7 is introduced. It grows quite rapidly. Then it hits a maturity stage where it is um, accepted and selling at a certain rate, and then it goes into decline. Now that's a somewhat of a planned product life cycle because Apple introduces new models every couple of years. So that product life cycle has a relatively short time span from introduction to growth to maturity to decline. You may see another product, let's say Coca-Cola, which went from introduction to growth and has been at maturity for a very long time. So it's been a mature product in, let's say, in the U.S. market for a very long time. It may be starting to experience some decline now with the uh, resistance to drinking sugared drinks in quantity. So it's still a strong product. It's in its mature phase, or it might be in its decline phase. And I'm not sure exactly where it's at, whether that it's stable or declining in terms of units. But that process has taken many, many, many years. I think Coca-Cola was first invented in the 1800s, late 1800s sometimes. So the long time that Coca-Cola has gone through this process. So you got iPhones that go through a process in the period of a year and a half, and you've got Coca-Cola that takes more than a century. So, um, but they all go through it, and that cycle, if you were to graph it, starts with introduction, goes up for growth, flattens out for maturity, and then goes down for decline. Um, Here's a little graphic that's actually pretty good. You launch a new product, the kinds of things you do for marketing when you're launching a new product, the kinds of things you do to market when you're in the growth phase, what do you do when you're in the maturity phase, and what do you do when you're in the decline phase. I find a more useful thought process in terms of thinking about the product life cycle may be this, and this is from the Boston Consulting Group. They came up with this quite a long time ago in the 1980s, and it's proven to be a very, very useful tool for marketers because you can take almost any product and put it into this graph, and it works. It helps you understand what the product is and what you should be doing from a marketing standpoint. So on the left-hand axis, you've got market growth rate. Are you in a fast-growing market or a slow-growing market? And on the across the top, you've got market share. Do I have a high percentage of market share in the market I'm in, or a low percentage of market share? So in the lower left, you've got cash cows. These are low, slow-growing markets, but we have a very high market share. Wow, they generate lots of money for us because we control the market. We have a large market share. And even though the market is growing slowly, that means I don't have to invest in lots of new machinery to make more product or whatever. I don't have a large amount of capital investment necessary, but I'm selling a lot, and I'm probably selling them at a pretty good price because I control the market. That's a cash cow. Go up to the star there, we're now taking something that we have a fairly high market share and the market's growing fast. That's a star. We're going to put more resources, both marketing resources and production and capital resources into that because it's a star. It's growing fast and we're the dominant player. So we got a high market share and we have a fast growing market. So that's the most attractive one. So what we want to do for those two is we want to take money from the cash cow, which is generating lots of revenue, and invest it in the star. And that might be money, it might be resources, it might be time, effort, all sorts of different things. But the cash cow can generate money so we can grow our stars. Then you go over to the question mark. These are products in high growth markets, but currently at least we have a low market share. So we're a minor player in the market, but the market's growing real fast. Should we put resources into that or should we not put resources into that? That's a question mark. We have to make that decision. So that's where the hard decisions come, is with those question marks. We're a small player in a fast growing market. Should we try to get to be a big player or should we leave the marketplace? That's where your question marks come in. And then on the lower right, we've got dogs. These are products that we have a small market share and the market isn't growing very fast. Probably want to axe those products, want to get out of those products. Not much hope. If the market isn't growing fast and we have a small market share, it's really hard to displace other players in a market when the market isn't growing. So it's hard to increase market share if you're in a slow growth market. So that works really well at BCG, and it parallels the product life cycle graphic or process pretty well. So generally speaking, stars and question marks are going to be in their introductory or growth phases. Cash cows and dogs are going to be in their maturity or decline phases. So this always confuses my students, and that tends to confuse me a little bit as well. Two different kinds of things we talk about when we talk about products. We talk about product mix and product line. So mix is the overall assortment of products that we offer, and the line are things grouped together. So if we use a LL Bean as an example, the product mix would be we carry clothing, boots, and backpacks. A product line would be all the clothing items that we carry or all the boot items that we carry. So the width of products, we have three. In this case, we have three lines offered: clothing, boots, and backpacks. That's my product mix, and that's how wide it is. If I had 10 lines of product, then I would have a wider product mix. If I had just one line of product, then I would have a narrower product mix. And then product line depth, the things that we offer within the line. So the number of styles of coats and pants in my clothing, or the number of styles of footwear, or the number of styles of backpacks. That tells me the depth of the product line. So if I just have a very few, I have a fairly shallow product depth. And if I have lots of styles, I have a deep product line. See if you can retain that, because I'll probably ask you some kind of a question about that in your quest. So sometimes companies choose to do what's called a line extension. So they put an established brand name on a new product within the product line. So if you look at the Lay's potato chip, the classic Lay's, that's a very well established brand, and they have done lots of brand extensions. The one that I have a picture of there is one that didn't work. That was one a few years ago where they introduced a no-fat Lay's potato chip, and they used a synthetic fat in it. I think it was called, began with an O. And it turned out that that wasn't a really good thing to do, because that synthetic fat, non-fat fat, um, caused a lot of people to get diarrhea. So not a good thing. So they pulled it from the market, but it was um, a line extension. So they took an existing line, potato chips, and they added a new flavor or a new type of potato chip. Obviously, they've done the same thing with zillions of different flavors and ripples and non-ripples and all sorts of different kinds of things. So there's ways to, those are all line extensions. A brand extension is a little different. We are producing something and we take our brand and put it on some other segment. So here we've got Snickers bars, a well-known candy bar, and then they've done a brand extension by putting their name on ice cream. So ice cream and candy bars are both foods, but they're different product lines, and we've extended our brand to a different product line because the brand is powerful and people would like perhaps to eat Snickers flavored ice cream. Now Snickers might do that by starting an ice cream company and branding it with Snickers, or they might choose to license their Snickers brand name to an ice cream maker and let them use their logo and their product, their flavor, in ice cream. Either one of those is a possible way to do that. So just as an example, if I add a new product, that's going to lengthen my product line. If I add a new line, that widens my product mix. If I do a brand extension, that widens my product mix. If I drop a product, it shortens product mix, and if I delete a line, it narrows product mix. So those are some of the ways we look at product line and mix. So now we're going to start talking about branding. So what does brand do? Brand differentiates product and provides tells a story without us having to tell the story. Once a brand is established, you have a very good idea of what it is. So well-planned or strong brands have the power to convey all sorts of information with just a symbol or a name, and that's powerful. So if you look at the first logo I've got there, the Courtyard Marriott logo, what Marriott is doing there is they're using the Marriott brand name to strengthen the Courtyard brand name. So Marriott has chosen to use their brand name Marriott and put it on their Courtyard hotels as well as a variety of their other hotels. So you can relate to the Marriott part of it and you can relate to the Courtyard part of it. So that adds strength. In the hotel business, Hilton, one of Marriott's competitors, has chosen something very different. So Hampton Inns are a Hilton brand, but they don't say anything about Hilton on the Hampton Inn sign or logoing. So they've chosen to establish a totally different brand for Hampton, that's different from the Hilton brand. Both successful, both work. Two different choices. Marriott thinks that their Marriott brand adds value to the Courtyard, and they don't think that Courtyard depreciates the Marriott name when they put it on a Marriott Premier or top of the line Marriott hotel. Gap chose something very different when they introduced Old Navy. Gap existed and had a definite market niche of sort of mid-level product. They wanted to go down market to a less expensive product niche, and they decided not to use the Gap name when they opened Old Navy. So Old Navy was a lower end brand owned by Gap. They could have called it Old Navy by Gap, or they could have just sold cheaper product in the Gap stores, but they chose to rebrand thereby not damaging their Gap name. So that was a attempt to meet another market niche without hurting the market niche we're already in. Private label brands, very common. Got a picture there of a Walmart one, but almost any large grocery chain will have their own private labels, whether it's Hannaford or Shaw's or Walmart. And private labels are dealt with in different ways by different marketers, but private labels are generally not manufactured by the company that's labeling them. They're manufactured by other companies and then labeled by the retailer. Usually they're lower priced products, not always, they don't have to be. They could be higher quality products at higher prices. In the supermarket world, we're used to the house brands being cheaper than the name brands, but that doesn't have to be the case. And it's a branding strategy to allow the retailer to control their product. You can't compare Walmart products to Target products. Walmart's products, house brand products, are Walmart house brand products. You can't compare them for price or quality or anything else. So it gives them more marketing control over those products. And then co-branding, we see that all over computers and other places. So you've got the example here, you've got a Dell PC. And if you own a Dell PC or anybody else's PC, you probably have an Intel brand name on there somewhere. And you may well have a Windows brand name on there somewhere. So they're co-branding. The Dell is the company, but Intel inside is valuable to them to put on a brand their computers with Intel. And it's valuable to Intel to have their name on the Dell computer. So there's a co-branding. Both companies get benefit from that. So branding has to be meaningful. So it has to mean something to people. It has to be recognizable and memorable. So brands, you need to recognize them and know what they are. It has to be capable of being legally protected, and you're going to be careful about this. You can legally protect brands in the US and then you go somewhere else and they may not be protectable. So you have to make sure that you can legally protect your brands. And you have to make sure that whatever words you're using don't mean something different in a different language. The classic marketing case is the Nova brand that Chevrolet put on some lower priced models a number of years ago. And Nova meant new for American buyers, but it also meant no go for people buying in Spanish speaking countries. So no go is probably not something good to call your car. So that's a classic case, but there are others. You got to be careful if you're looking to establish or create a brand that may eventually be international, and you want to make sure that the brand you're creating is suitable for international markets. Positioning. So branding identifies the product, sets it apart from the competition, and positions it. People perceive things about brands immediately. So the branding power is, I know the product, therefore I have comfort buying that product without doing a whole lot of research. So I've thrown a bunch of brand names on this page, companies from the outdoors clothing world, the world I used to live in. So I would assume that given that we're a Maine school and most of you are somewhat familiar with Maine, you've probably heard of L.L. Bean. Well, think about what L.L. Bean means to you, that brand name. What does it mean? Does it mean quality? Does it mean low price? Does it mean serviceable? What does it mean? And does it mean something different than the brand right to its left there, the North Face, which probably most of you recognize? The North Face has a brand image and a brand. I'm not going to just think about it in your head. What does the North Face mean, and what is it different from L.L. Bean? And then most of you probably know the brand to the left there, Columbia, this one here, also makes clothing. How does that compare to North Face and Alpine? Do you have a conception about what a Columbia piece of garment will be like relative to a North Face garment? Do you already know what that means? So those three brands are pretty big brands, and most people know them. Some of the other brands on this page you may not know. Marmot is a relatively high quality outdoor clothing maker, somewhat similar to North Face, but it has its own brand image. Rab on the right here is a British outdoor clothing maker that's making some inroads into the U.S. market, also probably above the North Face in terms of quality perception. Patagonia, many of you may be familiar with, also an outdoor clothing brand. Millet is the clothing, or Millet, or Millet, however you want to say it. The French say Millet. It's the brand that I brought to the U.S. A number of years ago and set up their distribution in the U.S. Very, very high-end product, higher end than North Face or Marmot or Patagonia in most cases. Very technical mountain climbing, mountaineering equipment. And then White Sierra is a low-end brand. So all of these brands have images for some of you, maybe not all of them because they're not as well known, but these three brands, I bet you all know. And you may be groaning, oh, I hate that place. Or you may be saying, oh yeah, I love their whatever, their fries or something. But you know these brands. So what's the power of that brand to you? The power is I'm driving down the highway and I see a McDonald's sign. If I stop there, I know what I'm going to get. I know what it's going to smell like when I walk through the door. I know what the food is going to taste like, and it's consistent. Is that a benefit to you as a consumer? Probably. You know what you're going to get. If you go to a non-branded diner, it might be fabulous or it might be terrible. If you go to McDonald's, you're going to get consistent food. Whether you like it or not is a whole nother question. Whether it's good for you or not is a whole nother question. But from a branding standpoint, McDonald's has a very strong brand, as does Burger King and Wendy's. So for travelers, people who are not close to home, where they don't necessarily know the local establishment, these brands have tremendous power. The next slide is one of the most powerful brands there is, and it's always been a mystery to me why it's so powerful. But Heinz Ketchup has something close to 80% of the ketchup market. Ketchup is not a high-tech product. It's not particularly hard to make, and it's not particularly hard to bottle or anything else. How does one brand have that kind of brand strength that 80% of the people who buy ketchup buy Heinz? Think about that. It's pretty amazing. It's tomatoes with some spices. There's not a whole lot going on here in terms of technology or anything, but they have incredibly strong brand power. You recognize the bottle, you recognize the label, and most likely, if you're like me, you probably buy it and use it at home. 80% of the people in the United States do, and 80% of the restaurants do as well. Pretty amazing. That's power of brand. We know it, we like it, and we buy it again. And we're not very price sensitive. We'll pay a little more for Heinz than we will for the house brand in the supermarket, or for the few competitors that Heinz has, like Hunt's and a couple of others. I think Delmonico makes some ketchup. So there's alternatives. The alternatives are probably just fine, but Heinz manages to control the market because of the power of that brand name. And their brand name is not as strong in some of the other products they make, but in ketchup, it's incredibly strong. So that's kind of where the power of brand comes from. If you can create that power, customers maintain loyalty. It just is incredibly important to get brand power if you can. It insulates you against threats from competitors. You can bring out new products using that same brand. We looked at that with Snickers or Lay's. So really, really strong. So it encourages brand loyalty. It boosts the value of a customer lifetime because they come back. And from the consumer standpoint, what we talked about with McDonald's or Burger King, it makes decision making easier. If I go to the supermarket, I don't have to think about which ketchup to buy. I just buy Heinz. It's easy. I know what it tastes like. I like it. I can buy it. So all of those things make brand